We're going to dive into a geopolitical mystery that unfolded in just 48 hours. It's a crazy story about a war that was literally moments from starting, and then, for a bunch of secret reasons, it was suddenly called off.
Okay, picture this. It's January 15th, 2026. Tensions between the US and Iran have absolutely boiled over. The United States is on the very brink of launching a massive military strike. The entire world is holding its breath, and then, poof, nothing. The order to attack was pulled back. The war that seemed completely inevitable just disappeared from the headlines. So how on earth does that happen? Well, the first clue is honestly a little weird. It's something called the Pentagon Pizza Index. Now, obviously, this is not some official government metric. It's a quirky but surprisingly accurate indicator that's been around since the 90s. The whole idea is pretty simple. When a major military operation is about to kick off, people in the war rooms at the Pentagon and the White House are working super late and they order a ton of pizza. And sure enough, on the night of January 15th, the pizza deliveries to Washington's nerve centers went through the roof. I mean, all the signs were pointing to go time. So the big question is, what on earth happened in those critical hours to make the world's most powerful military suddenly slam on the brakes? All right, the first piece of this whole puzzle came from a single phone call. And the person on the other end of the line was the absolute last person you would ever expect to ask the US to stand down. I mean, just look at how fast this all happened. On January 13th, the US president basically tells Iranian protesters help is on the way. An attack looks like a done deal. But then, on the 14th, that one critical phone call comes in. And by the 15th, the whole mission is scrubbed. It all pivoted on that single conversation. And this is where it gets really mind-bending. For 2 decades, Israel, especially Prime Minister Netanyahu, had been the loudest voice on the planet pushing for military action against Iran. And yet, behind closed doors, on that day, Netanyahu made a formal request to the White House. Please, you have to delay the attack. So this is the million-dollar question, right? Why would Iran's biggest foe, its staunchest opponent, jump in at the very last second to stop an American strike? I mean, it goes against literally everything they've been saying publicly for years. Well, the answer comes down to some cold, hard, strategic math. Israel's famous Iron Dome missile defense system had taken a real beating in a conflict just a few months earlier. Simply put, they didn't have enough interceptors. Their cupboards were bare. Netanyahu knew that if the U.S. hit Iran, Iran's first phone call wouldn't be to Washington. Their missiles would be flying toward Tel Aviv. Israel was exposed, and it desperately needed time to rearm. But, Israel's secret plea was only one part of the story. The next major headache for Washington came from its own allies in the region, and they delivered another huge blow to the Pentagon's plans. America's key Arab partners, we're talking Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt, did something pretty much unthinkable. They told the U.S. military, nope, you cannot use our airspace for an attack on Iran. For Qatar, which hosts the biggest U.S. airbase in the entire Middle East, this was a massive deal. Why? Pure fear. They were terrified Iran would make good on its threat to attack the oil fields of any neighbor that helped the Americans. And you have to understand, this created a logistical nightmare for war planners. Without that airspace, U.S. jets would have to fly a much longer, way more complicated, and far more dangerous route to their targets. The risk to pilots and planes went up dramatically. So, let's move to the final pieces of the puzzle. This is where we see a huge gap in America's own military readiness, plus the quiet, behind-the-scenes moves from other global powers who were watching very, very closely. Look, for a war of this scale, the U.S. absolutely needs an aircraft carrier strike group nearby. It's non-negotiable. But its key asset, the massive floating fortress USS Abraham Lincoln, was just too far away. Trying to launch a major strike without the air cover from its dozens of fighter jets was just way too risky. It would have left American forces in the region completely exposed to an Iranian missile counterattack. And while all this military drama was happening, there was a whole different war being fought in the shadows. Elon Musk turned on Starlink to help Iranian protesters get around internet censorship. But right away, China and Russia jumped in on Iran's side. Chinese cyber experts were reportedly on the ground in Tehran, helping Iran build a stronger firewall, while Russia gave them diplomatic cover, calling the whole thing a foreign plot. The U.S. was not acting in a vacuum. So the attack was called off. A last-minute plea from an unprepared Israel, closed skies from nervous allies, and a missing U.S. aircraft carrier all combined to force Washington's hand. But does that mean the danger is over? Not a chance. The conflict has just shifted its shape, shifting from a battle of missiles to a battle of money.
And we just cannot forget the terrible human cost inside Iran. While the world was focused on this threat of a huge war, human rights groups were reporting that over 2,600 protesters had been killed in the government's brutal crackdown. That struggle is still very real. So America's new strategy is now coming into focus. Step 1, pivot from military threats to economic warfare. They're threatening a huge 25% tax on Iran and anyone who does business with them. But step 3 is the real kicker. The military pressure is still on. That aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, it didn't turn around. It's still steaming towards the region.
You know, one strategist summed up the whole situation with this really powerful analogy. This pause isn't a retreat, it's a recalculation. It's that moment a predator stops, not because it's scared, but to find a better angle before it strikes. And that leaves us with the final, really unsettling question. Did the world just pull back from the brink of a massive war? Or was this just a temporary ceasefire, a pause for everyone involved to rearm, reposition, and get ready for an even bigger, more dangerous conflict yet to come?